Hello, ladies and gentlemen of YouTube, and welcome to another Star Wars review. I am Deadponic. I am joined by King Orange.
I've been looking forward to this.
Anyway, so for this review, we are going to be talking about the 2003 Clone Wars Microseries that came out between 2003 and 2004. For this video, we will be talking about Volume 1, which covers the first 25 chapters. However, we're just going to break it down by volume, and we're just going to go through the entire thing. One thing to note here is that this is the series that came out before Star Wars The Clone Wars, and was meant to originally bridge the gap between Episode 2 and Episode 3. This was actually meant to basically describe how the Clone Wars broke out and how it played out over the course of 3 years. What, 3 years was it?
Yeah, pretty much. Very unrealistic time frame, but that's what George decided to go with. So just got to run with it. But yeah, pretty much the micro series came out, started in 2003, and then it ended in 2005. I think, just about like about a month before Revenge of the Sith came out.
And one
Just
thing
about.
and one thing to note here is the animation style is much different from the Star Wars: The Clone Wars, because this series was actually done by the same guy who did Samurai Jack. Hence, if you've watched Samurai Jack, you'll notice the obvious correlation here. So, one thing I would like to talk about here is some of the interesting things that I learned, which we'll get into later a little bit. But one of the things I find interesting is James Earl Taylor, who voices Obi-Wan, he's in both this series and Star Wars: The Clone Wars. However, I don't know who the actor for who plays Anakin.
Matt Lucas.
Yeah. Well, is it for Star Wars: The Clone Wars, or is it for the Micro
Oh,
Series?
that's Matt Lantern.
Yeah.
Lantern. Yeah,
Okay.
I think I'm saying it right.
And one thing
Yeah,
he definitely
Matt
cover
Lantern
he definitely
did.
captures Hayden part, because this is supposed to be, at least this first volume is basically the transition for how Anakin went from Padawan to Jedi Knight. And also, there's a bunch of the obvious thing here is, well, Frank Oz came back to do the voiceover, and another actor from Star Wars: The Clone Wars came back, and he voices Count Dooku. I'll let
Or yeah, Curry Burton.
yeah.
So a lot of the Clone Wars cast that eventually came because the voice actor for Mace started here, the voice actor for Yoda started here, and so a lot of the voices that we grow accustomed to in the 3D show kind of started out their Star Wars journey here as far as television, though some of them also voice acted in like video games and that kind of stuff. So
And one thing, we did mention this in our BF2 review, but this is basically the version that depicts the clones not as like individuals, but more of as a coalescent group. And it's very interesting how they portray the clones in this version. And I actually particularly like this version of the clones. I do like the TCW version, but this is probably the version that is most interesting to me, because
well, and it's if for better and for worse, it's definitely much closer to what you would expect out of the film versions. So with that in mind, yeah, with background out of the way, let's get started.
yeah.
So
So the
pretty much,
so the
oh, go ahead.
the
Go ahead.
main intro here is kind of interesting, because it starts off with Yoda riding his, I'm guessing that's a goat of some kind, and then basically, like, Shakti and all the clones, they charge into battle. And um well, he basically narrates everything. He says, like fire across the galaxy, the Clone Wars spread. In league with the wicked Count Dooku, more and more planets slip. Upon how does it go again?
Upon upon like this desperate hour calls the Jedi Knights to
to lead
serve
to
the
lead
army of the
to
Republic.
lead the
And
Grand Army of the Republic. And as the heat
yeah,
of war grows,
so
so,
dude, so too does a most gifted student of
of the
the Force.
Force. And then it cuts to the Chancellor's office, where basically we get the setup of what's going on with the main plot. Because the one thing about this series is that it was broken into very small, relatively small chapters or episodes, because that was something they did back then. So basically, uh, Obi-Wan explains that the banking clan has built massive droid factories on Munilist, and they basically said, okay, we have to send a fleet and intervene. And Palpatine's just like, I agree, but who to send? Master Windu still fights on Dantooine, and my army is ready, Chancellor. We can leave immediately. I'd suggest placing
And I suggest placing young Skywalker in command of
our
of
space
a fleet
forces.
of our space forces. His exceptional piloting skills will serve us well. Chancellor, I don't know if Anakin's ready for
it,
such an
it is
assignment.
decided then. And that's
Yeah,
it. Just
it's like,
like,
very young Anakin is, but exceptionally grown he has become. Perhaps then it is decided.
decided.
It's like
I love the little thing he does with
emphasis
the
of just Palpatine once again puts the role troll in the word control.
I love the little thing he does with his hands. I mean, the animation is clearly emphasizing that whole thing. Where I love the little thing he does with the hands, and then they have the little
He's such a Machiavellian.
very
He's
much,
such a
and then
Machiavellian.
and probably this leads to a callback to the end of Attack of the Clones, where it has that tune going off, and Obi-Wan says, "I doubt even Master Qui-Gon could have prepared a Jedi for this." And it shows all the clones running and preparing to leave, and Anakin, like, he does this dramatic thing where he's just walking and then the smoke fills up and he's like right on the landing platform, and he does like this thing where he throws back the cloak when it lands on 3PO. And this actually is another thing. Contrary to popular belief, R2 was not initially in part of the Clone Wars part here because he wasn't partnered with Anakin yet. He actually gets his own droid, which is an R4 unit, and he takes off. He has that heart moment where he sees Padme. They kind of touch the glass, and then he leaves. And then we get the briefing with the ARC troopers. These guys are very special, and I will kind of explain why. Basically, these are the special forces of the clone troopers. These are pretty much
Well,
not
at least one of them, one of the big special
yes.
forces. And yeah, if I'm not mistaken, these the ones portrayed in the microseries are from the, as far as what I can recall with clarification from the EU, from the expanded universe, they are the Alpha class ARC troopers.
And so basically, Obi-Wan gives them basically the briefing. Like, basically, you're going behind enemy lines. You're going to take out a bunch of stuff, and your success is critical to our.
You're the best, the elite. You all know what to do. once when we make planets, I complete your objectives, and I will follow.
And yeah, it's really cool. And one thing,
and you have the boy in the red freaking armor, my good boy Captain Porto.
Funny thing here, small thing here. They mistakenly often they call him commander or captain, but the
it is a small dialogue issue where they kind of go back and forth with that. I don't know why that's the case. Like, the way I always kind of the way I reconciled it mentally, and I think the EU might have done this, is like, I think it still doesn't completely make up for all the BS, but from what I can recall, I think Fordo might have been promoted once when Munilist concluded.
They refer to him, well, in the subtitles, he is actually referred to as a captain by the time of the Battle of Coruscant, but that might be just a small thing that they...
Maybe it could be like he's an acting commander, like say like if the current one gets killed during the battle, then he kind of takes the place of it temporarily.
That makes sense, and for this mission, it does make sense that he would, be a commander for these ARC troopers, because they are considered to be special forces. Anyway, They deploy, and just a wave of gunships fall up on the planet. And
that is the brilliance of this animation that I gotta credit. It's like, TCW animation is very like, with the 3D, you have a lot going, but it's like, because of the nature of it being computer generated and how expensive that is, there's always a bit of a limit to how big you can make the scale. That is not the case here. This show has absolutely no reluctance of just having it where it's hundreds upon hundreds of gunships just flying down to the entire planet.
And probably my favorite thing here is also when the ARC troopers finally break off, a droid runs up the steps, and he has that the classic Roger Roger, but it's a different kind of Roger Roger than what you think.
Roger, Roger.
And
Well,
fun,
yeah, because this was at a time before the droids were like portrayed as very like
goofy.
more goofy. So it's very much that like Phantom Menace like voice, like Roger, Roger,
Yeah,
just so like basic and simplistic. And I don't know, comparing it to DCW, I always feel like as much as I love how the battle droids in DCW are given a lot of personality because they're hilarious every time, there is always that little part of me that kind of misses the old like just robotic quality that they
yeah.
had.
So they get shot down, and I look reference here. We're going down.
Of course,
Or
of course. And yeah, they crash. Thankfully, sadly the pilots don't make it because of course if you're a clone pilot, you might as well be a red shirt from Star Trek. Um
Don't bring up the red. Don't bring up the Star Trek stuff. Anyway,
but the Arcs thankfully survive, but they get greeted by
and
another group of battle droids that
oh
are
yeah, that's
carrying the famous sniper rifles that pretty much all the weapons you see in here used by the battle droids are pretty much the exact same weapons that are like in the Battlefront games. Because pretty much
yeah.
like the rocket launcher is the same one for the heavy droid in Battlefront, and then the sniper rifle's the exact same too. So it's
Except
kind of funny to see that.
except it's rapid fire. Also, I never thought I'd get to make this reference. We're operational, ma'am. Barely. Our pilot didn't make it. Find a hole. Stay
Oh,
put. We'll
bloody.
come to you.
This was like such a Halo 2-esque sequence, which is kind of funny because 1 year later Halo 2 actually comes out. So like this is almost the Halo 2 before Halo 2 with that. But
So they use these little things to actually scan for thermal signatures, which, side note here, droids don't emit thermal signatures, but I guess it's
you could say it's like a like maybe heat signatures because
electromagnetic.
even the electronics would generate heat.
Yeah, electromagnetic or something. And basically,
Yeah.
the big rocket launcher basically takes out the buildings, and
By the way, the rocket launcher, same one as the Republic Heavy in the first Battlefront. And if I'm not mistaken, wasn't the Republic Heavy in the first Battlefront actually classified as an ARC
he
trooper?
wasn't. He does have the same design. He has the battle comma. He's got the same helmet. It is entirely possible that they took inspiration from that and basically used that to design the heavy trooper, which I find interesting. I mean,
Which
granted,
makes sense. It makes sense, especially considering the game comes out just about 1 year after the show started.
yeah. So they play a probe droid and they find the big gun, and well, they continue on, and then they get ambushed by an AAT, which yeah, AAT's no joke here. Although granted, one of the most badass things happens here where while they're distracting the tank, another ARC trooper comes in, repels down, and basically blasts his way through the tank, and it ends up blowing up. I thought that was a really, and every time something like major like that happens, the music kind of swells up, which is really cool. I thought that was a really neat detail, and it's such a good, like, this is such a good sequence. I mean, the entire Battle of Munilist is a really good sequence, but this one really sticks out to me. And then they reach the gun, and they use all the explosives they have to take this thing out. And then we get introduced to one of the most badass characters in all of Star Wars, Dirge. For those of you who don't know who this character is, he is a bounty hunter, but there's one little quirk about him that if you played Jedi Survivor, you'll know. Ravis is a similar species. This guy
He's
is
borderline unkillable.
pretty much like he.
He's borderline unkillable, and on top of that, Dirge is also like probably one of the most psychopathic bounty hunters. Like he's actually a full psycho because the entire like even though the show doesn't really get into it, the entire EU basically has it where Dirge was essentially a rival for Jango Fett and wanted the opportunity to kill Jango, but failed because,
Yeah,
circumstances. Mace Windu decided to have a field day. So he's like, you know what? I'm just going to spite Jango Fett by joining the CIS and essentially killing thousands upon thousands of troopers that look just like him.
yeah, pretty much. And the one thing about him is, as we mentioned, is he is a Gen Die, which basically means if you cut off his limbs, he can just take it and put it back. I like to refer. He is the Star Wars equivalent to Deadpool. That is. I don't say that lightly. That's the crazy part. And so basically the moons, they're like, those guns are destroying our forward position. And it's like, I don't know
Sir,
why.
the forward command center has been destroyed. What are we going to do? What are we going to
I
do?
don't
I
I
don't
don't know.
understand why why Count Dooku would hire you if all you're going to do is stand around and
I
whenever
ain't
you're
ready.
ready.
And
And
then
that
we
was from what I recall, that is actually that was Sand Hill.
Oh
Like Sand
really?
Hill actually makes an appearance in the show, which
That's
is
crazy. That's
a
crazy to think
godsend.
about.
So like,
And then this is the moment that kind of jumps the shark just a little bit, where basically he gets on his bike and he has like a little lance, and he basically charges out with a bunch of IG assassin droids. I think they're
yeah, IG Lancer droids, if I'm
yeah.
not mistaken.
And so he
And
he
it's
comes
it's
out.
amazing, by the way. Like to dissect that, it is okay. It's one of those things where it's like tactically it makes no freaking sense, but like it is just so fundamentally cool to watch that you're just like, you know what, I'll let it pass.
And basically
Especially since apparently these late Lancers are like in a way they're like strong enough to penetrate ATTE armor, and I'm like,
no.
what the hell are they making these things out of? Like, what are these things out of? Frickin' Beskar? What is this?
Yeah, and Obi-Wan spots this. He's like, mount up, and then we get basically a
The
cavalry.
Clone Lancers.
And well, obviously he's wearing a clone helmet. He has his own lance, but I particularly like this because they're charging at each other, and you just see absolute carnage. And then, well, Obi-Wan gets his helmet knocked off, and then he charges in, and he actually takes on Dirge. And every time Dirge tries to take out something, he like neutralizes or uses the Force, which is one of the first times that Obi-Wan has actually used to diminish. In fact, he stops a bunch of projectiles and he fire bends. I'm not joking when I say that. Like,
Yeah, which is it goes to show a lot of Obi-Wan's internal progression by this point, but on top of the fact that he is still not where he quite is going to be with his Revenge of self yet, which that's kind of a praise I already have to give this show is like Obi-Wan and Anakin are because while all this is going on, Anakin's leading space battle. And it's like I think what works, two things I already love about this show. One, the battles already encapsulate such a scale that you think to yourself, yeah, I could totally believe this is a planetary campaign. The second big element is I like how it really does present both Obi-Wan and Anakin as more or less pretty comparable to how they are in Attack of the Clones, where yeah, they're technically working together in
oh
military
yeah,
roles, but it's like
we didn't even talk about the scene before they set off, where basically Anakin's like, he basically boasts about his abilities, and he says, Padawan, your your abilities
your
have never
skill has never been in
questioned.
question,
It
it
is
is
your
your maturity.
maturity.
And that is fundamentally an aspect I really like. The show really does start with still having that Attack of the Clones dialogue or not necessarily the dialogue, but just that relationship dynamic. And it is in a better place in the start of the show than it was in Attack of the Clones, which is believable given the small time jump. However, it's still like you can very clearly tell with these characters that from a relationship perspective, they still have a long way to go. And
And then well
I can
we
already praise that.
and then they basically, well, after Obi-Wan quote unquote kills Dirge, he slices him in half. They breach the command center. Dirge comes back in his full like, because the thing about it is that all of his like musculature and like tendons and all that, they're actually like they're living. It's kind of, it kind of reminds me of, believe it or not, of the way the hunters are from Halo and how they're portrayed, especially in the terminal cutscenes, which is kind of interesting. Anyway, basically they try to take him on, and it doesn't work as well as they thought. And then Commander Foro uses electricity to try to zap him into his mission, and then Obi-Wan gets like caught in his muscular, and then he uses a force repulse to blast him completely to smithereens. This is not the last time we would see Dirge, though, as in the comics he was further expanded upon. And basically,
However, this is the last time he'll appear in the show. So he's definitely a one-off in the context of the microseries, but it works because he really is just kind of like that main boss battle in a way. So he works for that purpose. And one element I already really like in relation to that is the Battle of Munis really has that cooperative feel between the Jedi and the clone troopers. And another element that's really fun is just really seeing all the different Jedi abilities capitalized on, which, speaking of Jedi abilities, if you thought Obi-Wan was freaking insane, just wait until you get to the Battle of Dantooine
Oh,
and
not there,
Mon
not yet. Oh
I
yeah,
know, I know. We're not there yet. I'm just saying.
yeah. And so meanwhile in space, Anakin is doing his thing, and he even has like a kind of a pod racer more where he's like, "Trooper, fire all your missiles across the battle cruiser 8." But sir, there's nothing there. Do it now, Trooper. And then all the missiles follow him, and he literally flies into one of the ship's hangars, and all the missiles blow it up. And meanwhile, while this is going on, Count Dooku has gone to, I believe this is Rat Attack. I could be wrong here.
Uh, Before we get to that, I do want to mention the whole missile thing is the ultimate proof of something Jens Wright always says about like Anakin in his versus videos. Is like Anakin is effectively like making tactical decisions that any rational being would sit there and go, this is complete and utter insanity and madness. This is like there's no like this is madness. This kid is gonna get himself killed. And it's a case of saying Anakin is one of the few people skilled enough to pull it off, even though it's just reckless decision after reckless decision after reckless decision. And it's a case of saying if he wasn't the main character, he would be,
He would be dead.
yeah, he'd be dead. He'd be bloody dead. And this is just another proof example of that, where it's always taking the most risky thing possible to achieve the quickest path to success.
Yeah. So okay. So cutting to Count Dooku, he arrives on Rat
Yeah,
Attack.
we're gonna have fun with this.
So basically, he's in search of basically an assassin type character, and this is where we officially get introduced to Ventress. Now, the thing here is that Ventress was originally intended to be in the movie. However, that was cut and that was put into this series. Now, one thing I will say is that while TCW does move a couple details around, the thing is that she was born on Rat Attack, raised on Rat Attack, and her master was actually shipwrecked on this planet because it was a war-torn world. And basically, he discovered her and took her on as his apprentice, and then the warlords actually consolidated their power to basically take out these two Jedi, and that's how Ventress ended up being,
Kills Chimeric, but puts Ventress into a frenzy and effectively becomes like the warlord of Rat Attack at this point. So like, yeah, but with Dooku, which I gotta already credit one thing to the show right away, because as the scene progresses, Dooku has that like opening greeting, and then Ventress comes into the picture, and it just opens with like impressive. You masked your presence well, total control, absolute great precision. However, I am not looking for a spy. And it just scenes like that, and then the one later where after Ventress fights off all the
gladiators,
different bounty hunters and arena guys, she, she makes the claim like, the dark side is strong in me, for I am Sith. A bold claim, but you are not Sith.
And he does like this little
You
levitation
wear the
thing.
trapping. Yes, the ultimate signature look of superiority, just gracefully gliding down to the ground. It's so...
Hold on. One thing about the animation. Doesn't Dooku also have the elongated face like he does in TCW? Or is it...
He does, because that was the original like thing with the 2D animation style.
Oh, okay.
But it's kind of weird because in a way it's like it's more V-shaped in the 2D show, which is kind of funny.
That's a weird thing.
But yeah, he goes like, you have you wear the trappings of the Sith, you fight like the Sith, but these can be imitated. You lack a most essential quality vital for all Sith. Sith have no fear. I sense much fear in you. Ventress...
Oh, sorry.
Yes, go for it. Go for it. This is fun.
You are a foolish old man who knows nothing of the dark side. And then he...
Indeed.
And then he uses the lightning.
It's so good.
And then...
those two scenes represent everything. Like, this actually probably might be, I'd say probably outside of a couple of things, like obviously of the books, like outside of like Yoda Dark Rendezvous,
Labyrinth
Yoda
of
Dark
Evil.
Rendezvous, Labyrinth of Evil, and maybe Tales of the Jedi. This probably has like my favorite depiction of Dooku, even though he's not in the micro series that much. Because I love that the few scenes he's in, he conducts himself so well, that's so well aligned with his Attack of the Clones persona, where he is elegant, he is quite like he's almost very gentled, what's the word? Like,
Gentlemanly, like he's very
well,
like
he is gentlemanly to a fault. And he comes across almost with a gentle gesture, but it's just twisted just enough to signify, oh yeah, you're still a Sith Lord. You're still the bad guy. Like, because like his whole thing is it's kind of like he doesn't command his power through threats or actively trying to intimidate people. He just does it by I'm better than you, and these are the things I can do that proves I'm better than you. And that's and he's also just hypercritical, which is my favorite aspect of Dooku's like fights is like, hmm, if you were truly a Sith, would this contest not
oh
already
yeah,
be
yeah.
over?
She wakes up and she was like, "Why the hell am I not dead?" And then, well, Dooku attacks her, and they end up in a small skirmish. Then Dooku destroys her lightsabers, and basically said, and she's like, basically,
Finish it.
we have other
Finish
plan.
it.
We
Have you
have.
been watching, Master?
I
And
have.
it's so
Oh,
good. It's so good. Like that, just in like two scenes, we learn everything we need to know in regards with Dooku, his dynamic relation with Sidious, and just also just his in a weird way, like even though we get a more explicit teaching slash training scene with Dooku later in the micro series in Volume 2, this already signifies like the methods Dooku trains his disciples, and it's just it's all around fascinating the way he conducts himself because it's like I said, I think and I like that they do this where it's like he has that arrogant posture that is very aligned with a classical villain, but it's not he doesn't come across as vindictive or like a sadist.
no.
He's not either of those, which I would argue was probably like the biggest mistake TCW did with his character. They just
Yeah,
made him too vindictive and a full-on sadist.
yeah. Anyway, so basically, Sidious says to Ventress, basically, you're gonna be.
Right. Talented Anakin Skywalker, go kill him.
And also, so the thing is that also Dooku basically gives her a pair of twin lightsabers that are curved.
Which, if anyone's played Star Wars Bounty Hunter,
Which originally they were built by Kamari Vosa, but then Dooku offs her, and that's how she gets, and that's how Ventress gets her those lightsabers. That these lightsabers became iconic to Ventress, although they were originally owned by Kamari Vosa. So then she sets off in one of the coolest ships I have ever seen in a Star Wars setting, and
mm-hmm.
Dooku even remarks, "She will be more than a match for young Skywalker."
That matters not. She is merely an instrument to ensure the eradication of the Jedi.
Let's quickly talk about Sidious's like hologram and like, how he looks, because he has like these jagged teeth, and I'm like, what the hell?
It's purposely exaggerated. It's like you're just supposed to look at it and go, "Oh yeah, that's the bad guy." Like and it kind of works in a way because I think it kind of the way you almost have to interpret the art style, it's the way I do at least, is the way the characters look is less of a, ooh, this is how they actually look, because of course not. And I always treat it as more as these are how other characters are perceiving this character. So like when Ventress sees Sidious for the first time, she's probably thinking, holy fuck, this guy is scary. Like
Yeah, and
he's
that's kind of the point. So while this is happening, while she sets off to Munolus, basically what happens is her fighter comes in and takes out a bunch of clone trooper ships, and so this leads to the fighter duel between her and Anakin. Now, her ship is
I think
actually.
before we get to the Anakin and Ventress fight, we should probably briefly cover Dantooine,
Oh yeah, we have to do
Mongala,
that
and
too.
the
Yeah.
Ilum and Ilum.
Oh, and
I
Ilum.
think we
Yeah.
should probably cover those first, and then we can because the Yavin 4 thing is going to have a lot to dissect.
Oh yes, absolutely. So okay, so let's do Dantooine first. So
Mace Windu is a fucking
oh
badass
my
in
god, so
every
this little kid is running, and
turn of the word.
he sees this massive battle between the clones and the droids, and then Mace Windu comes in all heroic like, and then he ends up losing his lightsaber, and he goes up to the super battle droids and literally punches them like he's like Jackie Chan or Bruce Lee. He's literally ripping them apart with his bare fists, and he literally goes
I
up
think
to
it's almost like one of the best like on-screen examples of how far physical augmentation can take you, because I think that's an element that the prequel films never really capitalized on to the same degree that they could have.
no.
Was like when you're a Jedi and you're receiving forced enhanced physical augmentation, you're effectively having the strength, speed, and stamina of like bloody Captain America, and you can practically do almost anything with that. And it's a case of saying like the micro series is just not afraid to capitalize on the Jedi's like just general power that's that is shown. Though, of course, it always contrasts it with another big exaggeration, like the fact that the separatist weapon is just a massive, like, it's just a
Jackhammer.
massive, yeah, like smash hammer. It's just like, the clones are just looking so confused, like, what the fuck is this thing?
And then it's basically a kinetic crusher, and then it just creates this massive like shockwave, and Windu reclaims his lightsaber, and he manages to basically chop this, like cut through this thing to such a point where it's literally falling and it explodes, and
he just jumps all the way from that to the cliff where the kid is. The kid's just like,
oh my god, like that is odd. Like it's like that kid from The Incredibles. That was totally wicked. And then he like gives him like his water.
Literally, let's be for real though. Let's be for real. That kid's reaction is what just about any kid in that generation would have reacted to Mace Windu. Just like, it's
and
just so
he gives
and he's nice. He gives him a water, so you know.
And then he takes it. And he's like smiling, and then he like leaps off to go continue the battle. Then we cut to Ilum. This is the first time that I've, as far as Star Wars media goes, is where we actually see how a lightsaber is actually constructed. And this is between Barriss Offee and Luminar Unduli. And
mind you, this was old Barriss Offee before Star Wars The Clone Wars altered a lot about her. So like back then, Barriss was much older. She was kind of closer to
Anakin's age.
Closer to Anakin's age. And then on top of that, she doesn't, at least before TCW came around and retconned everything, Barriss didn't end up becoming a, like, terrorist that bombed the Jedi Temple. In fact, she eventually becomes I think she gets promoted to a knight.
This is actually the scene. This is actually the scene where she actually does get promoted. Luminar basically says your training is complete. And also another thing to note here, she actually died on Kashyyyk, believe it or not. Or well, no, it was.
I don't think it was Kashyyyk. I think it was Felucia.
The film depicts Aayla Secura dying on Felucia. I don't know for sure if that's.
Yeah, I know, but I think Barriss Offee was there too.
Okay.
Because from what I recall, I think Barriss was also there because the Kashyyyk Jedi were Yoda, Luminara, and Quinlan Vos.
Yeah. And so they realize, oh shit, the temple's been breached, and we get introduced to chameleons.
The chameleon droids.
I hate chameleon droids. And basically there's a bit
they are a cool design though. Like they are cool from an aesthetic perspective because I like their very it's like just a common thing among CIS droid designs in general. I love their very insectoid look. It just like insectoid or either insect, arachnid, or like a sea creature that's like crawls around. Like I don't know why. There's just a vibe to that I always like. And yeah, the chameleon droids are great because essentially Luminar and Barriss are kind of undergoing this paranoia because they
can't see them because they're invisible.
They can't see them, but they have to rely almost exclusively on their force senses to detect danger. It's kind of like, to me, it's almost like when Spider-Man goes against like Mysterio in the way, like, I think it was in one comic or in Spectacular Spider-Man where he's like, okay, I have to make sure I don't fall for the illusion, so he purposely blindfolds himself and just relies exclusively on the spider sense.
The spider sense, yeah. So, and then, they split off, they take out the chameleon droids, but the chameleon droids have actually laid explosives, which blow up the temple, and, Luminar and Barriss are trapped underneath some rubble, and they're just holding it up barely with their force power. Meanwhile, for some reason, Master Yoda is on Padme Amidala's starship, And he basically uses forced persuasion to convince Captain Typho to reroute to Ilum. And
Jeopardize the mission, it will not. Help Jedi, we must. It's like, it's
I,
just another case of Yoda just being, like, Yoda, that's kind of the funny thing I think about with, like, Yoda and Palpatine is, like, two parallels, is, like, Yoda, even though he is a Jedi, is also just as much as of a troll sometimes, where he's just like, I'm just gonna have fun with this and mind trick your bodyguard to just agreeing with everything I say. And
so
Padme's like,
okay,
okay, Master Yoda, I see your point. I think I don't need any more of my security's
persuasion.
persuasion.
And so they rewrote to Ilum, and basically Yoda says, "Well, if I need help, I'll call you," kind of thing. And then, well,
Also, can we I gotta commend the writers for one thing. For designing Padme the way they did by only using one. Truly impressive, truly astounding.
yeah,
Because the way they designed Padme in that snow outfit is so suggestive, it is not even
it's
funny.
actually quite. It's also practical, and also it leads to one of the funniest
It
moments
is
for.
practical. It's just the curves of the angles within the drawings are very suggestive where it's like, I see what you were doing
Yeah.
there.
And so she literally, in order to flush out a bunch of, actually, well, Master Yoda has his own little fun with the chameleon droids, where he's holding onto the back of one. He's like, this is a tactic he loves to do apparently, and he just he's cutting through all of them, and he's like standing on top of one and deflecting laser fire, all while holding his cane too. I might add, and I think it's a really cool thing about Yoda and how how they depict him in this series. It's a lot of fun, and then well. Padme encounters a bunch of chameleon droids, and in order to flush them out, she takes off her cloak, or her coat, throws it out, and it says, 3PO, can you go get my coat? And then 3PO's just running out there, and he's like,
Getting
ah!
shot at. Just getting shot. I'm like, certainly there was like a certainly there was like you weren't like just sitting there like going, oh yeah, if 3PO dies, whatever, no biggie. Like, poor 3PO, man, he's gone through too much.
Yeah,
But yeah, he does that, and then Yoda ends up taking on most of the chameleon droids himself, and it's another kind of like Windu. It's a demonstration of just how badass Yoda is, and I like the tactics that are used because it's kind of a similar thing that he does in TCW Episode 1,
ambush.
Ambush. Thank you. Where he purposely just keeps landing in spots and doing different maneuvers to just make the enemies effectively go against each other without even realizing.
It's a fun tactic, and that's very in keeping with Yoda, because he doesn't, because it's a funny thing, and then
It's
he,
misdirection. It's purposeful misdirection, which is so great of like it's a case of the showrunners actually cleverly using Yoda's size as like an advantage thing for his tactics rather than a disadvantage. And it's like, to me, it's like his on-battlefield tactics with that are so good that it just feels so jarring to go from that to anytime he gets into a single lightsaber duel within the film, so he just leaps himself like a cannonball, and that's his
yeah.
strategy.
Yeah, so he finds Luminara and Barris. He comes back, and what they discover, well, these chameleon droids were sent by Dooku. And, yeah,
Who would attack the temple? You must find the temple of Ilum. Destroy
droid
it.
Dooku.
Dooku.
It's,
Like, oh
it's,
my
it's,
gosh. It's so melodramatic, but I can't help but love
he's
it.
so pissed about it. And then we get to Mon Cala. This is actually, well, this was actually done in TCW, but this is the first time that we had this. And can I just say the image of the acclimators just landing in the water was just so cool. And Kid Fisto, he has this yin yang thing on his belt. I thought that was a really cool touch. And he's like, okay, we're going in, boys. And it just dives into the water. And then, like you said, well, the big monster thing that they have here is basically, it's very centipedic kind of thing. And basically, well, the Mon Cala help out, and they use they're literally riding eels, and they have the lances and a shield, and they literally push this thing into basically a geyser. And also, this is the first time we get to see, well, this might be the only time, but basically, Kid Fisto, he creates this massive bubble, and he throws it at the centipede thing. It's like, what the hell was that? It's like, did you just throw a bubble at them? I'm like, okay, look. Okay, I get that they explain later in lore that this was basically he was creating a force orb. Which, fun fact, in the re-release of BF2, if you play as Kit Fisto on certain maps, you can actually use the force orb as one of his attacks, which is kind of cool. But at the time, like, it's like, what the hell? You're literally chucking a bubble at the centipede thing. I'm like, what the hell?
Hey, it's Kit Fisto. That's how it goes. It's just water is my ally. Air, water, earth, fire. The four nations lived in harmony
Alright,
until the Fire Nation
nation
attacked.
attacked.
Or yeah, it's great stuff all around. Because again, it's another nice example, like the force abilities being used in a really creative way. And I like how Kit Fisto's lightsaber has like a very unique
As a pulse, yeah.
emitter.
They explain, well, it's explained in lore that it's called a bifurcating circuit, which basically allows a lightsaber to function underwater. Um. Anyway, so we cut back to Yavin, and now we get to some.
Now we're getting to the
Yeah,
juicy stuff.
now we're getting to the fun stuff. So Ventress comes in, she wipes out a squad of clone fighters. Anakin and Ventress are there going after each other. There's even a moment where like Anakin goes, "I have you now," and then she just takes off. I gotta say, Ventress's ship is really cool in design. I'm not gonna lie. There is actually a figurine that you can buy that actually is her fighter. It's really cool. Because what it is, it kind of looks like a kite a little bit. Because what it is the wings, they fold down, and when they fold up, it's like a straight thing, and it has like a little energy thing, and the blasters are at the top and the bottom, and the cockpit's like right here. It's really cool. So, Anakin even says, "Increased power to the thrusters are for this is no droid pilot." So he chases after her into Munolus, and this leads to the clone trooper talking to Obi-Wan, stating the most obvious thing here. "That wasn't one of ours. No, General. That was Anakin." "Yes, General. Anakin. It's under control, Master."
Under control? You're supposed to be up in space, not chasing one single ship across the city. Like,
Master. It's like, yeah.
it's so good. Again, another dynamic of Anakin and Obi-Wan are progressively growing, but they're still not there yet. And I think it's nice just seeing, like, that is a good example of dialogue where you could totally buy that in the Attack of the Clones movie. And I think that's an element of their relationship I really like portrayed in the show that I feel like, again, to compare it to TCW kind of misses out on that by just automatically having Obi-Wan and Anakin already maturing to effectively their Revenge of the Sith selves straight
Anakin,
away.
you're crazy. Spinning is not flying.
But it's a good trick.
I love
Yeah,
that.
like, don't get me wrong, I still love their banter in TCW. It's still fun, but there's just a lack of progression that I feel like the micro series handles a lot better as a whole. So, and we'll talk about that more when we get into Volume 2.
Yeah, so
But, yeah.
So Anakin basically does the Anakin thing where he disobeys his master and literally cuts off like his comms and chases after Ventress, and they go to Yavin. And Obi-Wan's like, "I've got a bad feeling about this. You have the coordinates?" "Yes, sir. Take a squad and follow him," basically. And then we get to Yavin 4. Basically, well, Anakin lands, and then the clone troopers, they land, and they hustle out, and it's like, "Sergeant, sir, Commander Skywalker." "Obi-Wan, yes, sir. Gave you orders to follow me?" "Yes, sir." "Fine. Have some men protect the ships. The rest of you encircle the clearing. Prepare to sweep the jungle." And then, well, this is the one thing I always thought was weird, is the way, like, the clone troopers are being, like, killed off. Like, there's one flying through the air, one gets, like, thrown into the water, and there's even, like, one of them even does, like, not the Wilhelm scream, but the other scream that's synonymous with Star Wars. I forget how it goes. It goes, "Ow!" or something like that. It's funny story about that. The original guy who created the Wilhelm scream, his whole thing, like, when he first did the Wilhelm scream, was he was literally just screaming "ow," and it was funny as hell. And so the guy said, no, we don't want that. We want, like, a genuine, like, scream. And then that's how the Wilhelm scream came to be. But in this case, it's that other scream where they're literally screaming
But
"ow."
it adheres to Star Wars tradition by keeping it. And I think it's also another demonstration of like one thing I automatically like about the way Ventress is handled here. I like how much they emphasize her assassin aspect by literally having it where she just goes around like a dark phantom and just takes out as many of the clones as possible just through stealth tactics and just using the environment against them. And it's like, to me, what the microseries does so well is it just personifies the individual characters on their approach to combat. Like for Ventress, it's a case of saying she tries to be covert until she is finally drawn into that one-on-one conflict with Anakin, and that's when she's like, okay, I can reveal myself, I'm gonna kill you.
And it's all about presence, how you entered the room, basically. And so, well, this also leads to one of
Count
the
Dooku always knows how to teach theatrics.
theatrics. Yeah,
Theatricality and deception, powerful agents for the uninitiated.
I never thought you get to make that reference. Anyway, so the ships blow up along with R4, and Anakin's basically staring at Ventress as she's literally walking through the flames of the wreckage, and he goes,
He like uses the force to like clear some of the flames so she can walk through it, and then the flame just seals behind
"Yep,
her.
Moses reference anybody?
And Anakin's just pissed the fuck off. He's like,
I'm going to
"You're
make
gonna
you pay for
what
what
you
you did. Count Padawan, your fall will be my ascension to this." And then the fight starts. My
And then
God.
we pretty much get, I would probably say, this is probably the best fight in the entire show already, and it is like miles ahead of probably any of the TCW fights short of the Siege of Mandalore. Because it already personifies, like right away, as soon as they start fighting, you learn so much about the characters, so much. It's kind of like, it's like something you said back on Curse of the Black Pearl, which, don't worry, audience, we will one day cover that movie. Is you said like how the fight between Jack Sparrow and Will Turner is kind of almost like it's less of a fight and almost more of a character direction.
Yeah, there's a lot of videos that cover this, and I describe this is one of those fights that is not necessarily a fight in and of itself. It's more like a deadly dance. Oh God. I just had a
The most lethal dance you'll ever have. Because yeah, Ventress and Anakin are both completely adamant about killing each other, but they're so adamant of like really keeping specific movements and employing very specific tactics. And it shows a contrast where Ventress is a lot more loose, like loosely around serpent-like and very much pull, push, like pull, push, pull, push, pull, push, while Anakin is a lot more aggressive and just trying to get like straight into her face
and then we re-
and
then they
just
re- then it reached
approach.
they eventually reached the Yavin Temple. This is another thing here. This is the most prolific like depiction of the Makashi form besides Count Dooku, and the most prolific depiction of Form 5, namely from Anakin, although the other films do kind of show this off a little more. But then it starts to rain, and I thought that the little detail of the raindrops like sizzling on the lightsabers
Yeah,
was
and it like creates the steam. That is such a great detail from the animation
and they
department.
just stare at each other, and they're like, and then, well, Avengers basically picks up these like stones and chucks them at Anakin, and Anakin's like, he manages to like bat him away, and then he gets hit by one, and then it's just like Avengers is really rubbing it in that like she's at an advantage here, and she even has that pretentious
But
smile.
she's making the same mistake that you always do with Anakin, because Anakin, in a practical sense, especially accounting for the EU, he is effectively the Star Wars version of the Incredible Hulk. The more you piss him off, the more he's just gonna ramp himself up
Yep, pretty much,
and just become borderline unstoppable, because he eventually re-engages, pushes her inside of the temple. They have a
it's
brief like
quiet.
silence there, and I love that. I love that moment of just silence where
And
Anakin
then
is like really trying to find her. Yeah, crosses blade. And at this point, Ventress is like, oh, fuck. He's actually giving me a rough time now.
and
And so she
it
tries using the force on him with certain stuff. He just breaches right through the telekinetic
which
assault
tears
like
off
it's
his
nothing.
robes. It tears off his robes so that only his tunic is underneath, and then it
He tries
pushes,
to throw the pillar, and Anakin's just like, nope.
and then it leads back outside, and they actually go like they fight up the stairs, and then you just see the red moon, and I'm like, oh shit. And then, well, Anakin gets disarmed. And
I mean,
then,
it personifies that contrast though, because like the red moon is kind of like it's a good symbolism aspect because for most of the fight, Ventress has the red on her, but Anakin doesn't. He has the blue lighting.
yeah.
And so up until this point, you kind of think, oh, so it's kind of almost a personification between the light and the dark side. You know, Anakin is still fighting like he's trying to be a Jedi. Ventress is fighting conventional Darksider. The minute she gets Anakin ramped up enough where top of the temple with the red moon, the light emitted at Anakin is not blue anymore. It's
It's red.
red.
And
And this is the point where Anakin's like out for blood.
and he like
Ventress
grabs her
proves to be the
hand,
better duelist by disarming him, but then Anakin's just like,
grabs her hand, literally twists it, and she's like in pain, and literally one of her like lightsaber falls up, and he's just like hammering on her, and then all the while before like the end of the fight, there's like images of Yoda, Obi-Wan, and Yoda, Qui-Gon, yeah, and they're all like going back and forth, and then well, he actually like cracks the stone, and she falls into the chasm. Side note here, she doesn't die. This was
even though you really would think she does.
yeah.
Sure, no one could survive that fall. Hey, if Obi-Wan could survive the fall, I knew the pal Ventress can survive this.
And then, well, Anakin lets out this most primal scream, and I'm like, wow. That is like voice acting right there, because you get the sense that like he is like in his rage mode, but he's just coming off of it, and he just lets out the adrenaline.
It really goes to show just how primal the fights are in this show. And I think or the microseries, it really just personifies so well the contrast between Anakin and his opponent there. And I like the tactics that are generally shared between the two. Like circling earlier in the fight, the jungle bit where they're like using the trees to try to leap with each other and all that. It's just Genndy Tartakovsky is so good at keeping a fight dynamic where there's never a point where you get like bored of it or start thinking it's getting stale. He always knows how to escalate. Like to me, I feel like he makes his fights almost like musicals in a way, where it's like it's a constant shift in pitch and just crescendoing over and over and over again
That's funny,
until it hits
actually.
that high climax.
That's funny, actually. Most movie fights actually treat a fight itself as a musical, where like in those older movies where just a musical would just show up out of the nowhere, and it didn't really give anything to the story, but it was just there as kind of an entertaining thing. That's kind of what you don't want to do with a fight. You take example Curse of the Black Pearl with Will and Jack. That is how you need to give the fight the two characters a reason to fight and make the fight as well interesting. And that's what this fight does overall. And so basically,
well, it's dynamic. It's extremely dynamic and just it's pretty much like the thing about the fight that's so good, because I would actually say, like, easily say this is among probably like my top 5 best lightsaber fights in the entire Star Wars franchise.
Absolutely.
I would go that far because it tells you everything you need to know about these two characters and what they're fighting for, what they represent, and the escalation of emotions. So all of that just goes well, and it's like, honestly, even if someone doesn't end up watching the entire microseries, just watch that fight. It's so good.
Watch this scene. Just watch the entire Yavin sequence, and you'll understand everything about this series. And then, while Anakin returns, and the clone's like, "Sir, it's the ship that Anakin Skywalker chased is coming back. I have batteries standing by." And I'm like, "You were totally ready to blow Anakin out of the sky, weren't you?"
Obi-Wan's like, "No, wait."
Hold your fire.
Anakin jumps up. "It was a trap, Master, but I emerged victorious." Like,
that fight should never have happened. I find
we'll see that in that it's a good representation between Obi-Wan and Anakin's mind. Anakin's mindset is, "Oh yeah, sure, it was a trap, but I won, so it was okay." Obi-Wan's like, sometimes the best way of winning a fight is just simply not being at one. Like, and it's just shows that mindset, and before the two have an opportunity to argue, Obi-Wan gets the transmission, and that is when we are about to get one of the greatest villain intros.
Oh my god.
In show history.
Okay. Setup. Hypori, down acclimator, upside down, like with the engine sticking up. and we've got a bunch of Jedi running into the wreckage, including Ki-Adi-Mundi. Now,
I gotta do the scene though. Master Kenobi, General Kenobi,
Yep.
our
And,
forces are we are being overwhelmed. Our forces were utterly destroyed. New droid general. He's unstoppable. Get hold up for long. General is hunting us. Send
and,
reinforcements.
and then
Hurry.
and then the transmitter, it actually, like, all you see is this clawed foot stomping on it. And I love
So
this. It's so good.
the
Tension.
battle droids just super battle droids just lines and lines, and then suddenly you just see a white mechanical hand raise its hand, and all the super battle droids just stop
It's like,
right
it's great.
there.
So
And you're
all the
yeah.
Jedi
Go
run
ahead now.
they run into the wreckage, and so we have Shaak Ti, Aayla Secura, Kakruk, Ki-Adi-Mundi, and another character I'll get to in a minute, because I'm going to talk about this character in a minute. But basically, they're like, holy shit, he's kicking our ass. And Ki-Adi-Mundi kind of rallies the troops, and so they get ready to fight. And this is the first time we get the voice of General Grievous. Contrary to popular belief, this is not the first voice that voiced Grievous. This is actually the official. This is kind of the accepted version of Grievous, because we don't talk about TCW version of Grievous, even though he can be fun at times. Anyway, so they get their lightsabers ready because Grievous is coming to basically fight them himself. And one of the characters, his name is literally Sha Gi. I am not joking, and I have to do the impression here. Like Scoop, it's General Grievous, and he's like afraid, and he runs out, and he gets,
Like we're all gonna die.
and he runs out, and then he runs out, and he gets squished by Grievous, and then Grievous and it's like, and I'm like, holy,
So,
it's like,
he presents himself like a horror movie villain. That's what's so great about him. He's just
and then he
and
just
it works for
disappears.
his character. It works so well for his character because it's such a good introduction by effectively just pacing it like he's a horror movie monster. And it's like the fact that he is getting the Jedi scared shitless out of their minds really just
Let's talk about
shows.
his background for a second here, because funny thing, he was actually at Geonosis during that battle, but he was not allowed to participate. He was just sitting there watching all the Jedi that got cut
Yeah, and then
down.
I'm pretty sure once when the clone army came in, didn't Dooku order Grievous like, hey, I want you to escort the Separatist Council, make sure they get...
No, he was making his way through the catacombs. He encountered his first Jedi and actually killed her with ease, and then he claimed his lightsaber. Actually, Republic Commando actually has a sequence
Well,
where...
it's his first earned lightsaber, but it was his second lightsaber he possessed, because his first possessed lightsaber was...
given to him by Dooku.
Again, before TCW retconned all this, it was Sifo Dyas's lightsaber, and Dooku gifted it to him.
Yeah, so, and there's also a scene in Republic Commando where you actually can see Grievous' ship flying off, but at this point they didn't know that this was General Grievous. Now...
Yeah, it's good stuff, and yeah, pretty much, but right into this intro, he just... So yeah, as the Jedi are like trying to gather
he vanishes
themselves
into the
up.
shadows, and he just pulls out the lightsabers, and he just goes to town. He literally like grabs a guy with his feet and chucks him off. He actually like manages to he tosses a lightsaber in the air and slashes.
Is the type of movement he does bad shit ridiculous? Yes. Is it also fucking badass as hell? Yes.
And then,
And
well,
it works well because what the show capitalizes on is that he is pretty much 90% droid. So it's a case of saying he is not bound to the same kind of limitations that a organic being is.
that a meat bag
Grievous
would.
could spend himself 360 if he wanted. He could turn himself into a full like frickin' spider and just do whatever. He pretty much has like full omni control over his body. In the show, in the microseries, really capitalized on that by making him fight in these all unconventional ways that the Jedi are like, what the fuck is this? What the fuck is this?
And they're just barely hanging on, and then, well, Shaak Ti and Aayla get knocked out, and then Ki-Adi-Mundi, he actually, he gets his own lightsaber disarmed, and then he, pulls one of the lightsabers, and it was about to face Grievous. Grievous jumps, ending of that volume. It's like, that was...
Well, you do have that cut with Yoda, opening his...
Oh yeah, that's true.
I feel the coming storm grows, as the shroud of the dark side clouds us all. Bum, bum, bum.
It's just holy shit, man. That's how you do a villain intro. That is the
It
that is
really is. And I want to add another element of Grievous too, because I do like the thing about Grievous too is that it also establishes a principle to him that really does make him such a captivating villain right in this intro, because if he wanted to, he could have just sent the super battle droids, swarm them, kill them all. But he didn't. He's specifically like,
he said like
make
make
peace
peace
with the
with your
Force now. This is your final outing. However, I am not completely without mercy. I will grant you a warrior's death. And it personifies a bit of a code of honor with him, which I like how much that's personified in both the microseries and the larger expanded universe, though Grievous's degree of honor does tend to vary from moment to moment.
It's questionable at
But
best.
but it's a case of he at least has enough honor as a warrior to say, look, I could kill you with an overwhelming battle, but where's the pride in that? Where's the honor in that? No, I'm gonna fight you one-on-one. And I find that so captivating, and to me it's kind of where I would say, and I can't even completely blame DC, because arguably this downward spiral really started with Revenge of the Sith, is it's just a shame that Revenge of the Sith only relegated Grievous as a plot device that was just kind of pathetic the whole way through, rather than really giving him any kind of character agency for himself. Like, let's be for real. Revenge of the Sith, Grievous is only in that movie to give Obi-Wan an excuse. Like, it's only to have a reason for Obi-Wan to be off of Coruscant when Anakin turns. That's
Yeah,
the
pretty
only
much.
reason.
I mean, also, well, they do say in the novelization, well, the proof will come when Grievous is gone, basically, because they suspect that Palpatine might not revoke his emergency powers. So
But still, it's a case of, because of the fact that Revenge of the Sith and TCW just takes that and makes it even worse, is like Grievous is so pathetic in there that it kind of makes it like hard to believe. Like, you wouldn't sit there and go, oh yeah, this guy has to be taken out in order for the Republic to. You wouldn't really just you wouldn't. I mean, with the movie, you just have to take it at a surface level because we know nothing about him. But like, especially if you watch like TCW, I would be like, this guy's an idiot. You don't need to worry about that. But like, through the context of the micro series and seeing what he's capable of just in this first volume, you could totally buy that. Like, yeah, you need to take this guy out, because even with Dooku dead, even though the political leadership of the CIS is dead, Grievous still is like, gives the CIS teeth to bite.
yeah, pretty much. So concluding this review of Volume One, I say this is a very good opening. Like, if you had no idea what the Clone Wars was back in those days, I mean, it was briefly mentioned in Episode 4, but we never got a true depiction of it. I say this is a very good and a worthy watch, and absolutely this is what the Legends enthusiasts say. Hey, this is the true Clone Wars show, and I can get behind that notion. I do appreciate the depictions, especially of Obi-Wan, especially in that context, and also just the intro of Grievous, because that was an entrance, and the fact that the first thing we see is he literally crushes a Jedi. It's like, oh my god.
Yeah, I mean, overall, it just gives a lot of good perspectives, different things. I would say the only flaw with it, which it's not even really a flaw, it's just more of a difference in approach, is by its very nature, because they were originally just meant to be like commercials, each story segment is like very short. And so it's kind of like the show doesn't really, the microseries, at least with Volume 1, doesn't really have a lot of breathing room that focuses a lot on character growth. Most
Well,
of it is just
it is called
action.
the micro series for a reason, because he's
Well, yeah, no. I know. It's just, even in comparison to like Volume 2, for like Volume 2 made a very smart strategic decision, which we'll cover more when we get to them. But Volume 2 made a very smart decision to like extend the episodes from like 5 minutes per, Volume 1 had like a lot of episodes, but each episode was only about like 5 minutes worth of storytelling. While Volume 2 was like, okay, we're doing less episodes, but each one is like 15 minutes, so we have a little more to work with. with pacing and character work and that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
So
yeah, and
I would definitely say it's weaker than Volume 2 from a story perspective, but definitely more than matches Volume 2, and in some ways even exceeds it in terms of action choreography and just generally seeing the scale of these battles.
yeah, and it is. And when we get to Volume 2, there is a lot more action, but there's a lot more story moments here that we got to talk about. But anyway, that's it for now. Stay tuned for our next episode. Uh, anything else you want to add before we sign off?
Yeah, probably the last thing I would probably make mention of is just really highlighting that this the importance in regards with this micro series was for people that grew up in like the late 90s to early 2000s, this was like really the introduction to everything. And I think one big element about it that makes it important to watch is just it gives a lot of perspective for how the era was portrayed before the benefit of hindsight with Revenge of the Sith. Because
And
this
also,
was truly like,
and
oh, go ahead.
and also it led to the creation of the comics. With the comics, gave a lot more details and a lot more context and a lot more. There was a lot more going on than just the war. There were things about like the Jedi, like how there was a schism that was going to be created because some Jedi didn't want to fight in the Clone Wars. They thought it was basically like as Windu said, we're keepers of the peace, not soldiers.
Yeah, there's a lot of dissection to go into, and that's just generally it really sets like this is very much like for anyone that wants to like really just has any interest in the original Clone Wars multimedia project, this is like the best introduction to it. It's simplistic, it's easy to get into, it's not really like you're not really going to have many complications. If you want to try to like acquire it, it is on streaming on Disney Plus, and then it's also like you can typically find copies of the volumes on DVD, and they're not expensive.
No, they're
So
not. They're
yeah.
I
So
say
oh
yeah.
oh go ahead. Sorry.
I say look it up on Disney Plus. It's under the vintage of Star Wars of the Star Wars section, so keep that in mind. But it is a very fun introduction to this
I'd
series.
also say it's kind of a crime that it got decanonized to a degree. Because I would actually say in a weird framework, like even accounting for the Disney canon, I'd actually say even though most of the Clone Wars doesn't really work with TCW from a continuity perspective, and let's be for real, that's its own podcast that needs to be covered one day. Um, I'd actually argue that TCW in relation to the micro series, for the most part, actually can fit together pretty okay. For the most part. I think there are issues with it, like small continuity hiccups that you're going to run into, but for the most part, I think the two can coexist with each other pretty well.
Yeah, there is one thing I will say is that uh it doesn't isn't it it's not technically mentioned in the Clone Wars movie, which we will have to cover at some point, but there is a deleted scene, I believe, where Ventures basically says, hey, I've improved since last time we fought. I believe this is meant to indicate like not just the fact that she fought Obi-Wan and Anakin on Coruscant together, but when they tussled on Yavin 4. So you
It
could
makes sense too, especially given that the prequel episode, The Hidden Enemy, wasn't made yet.
yeah.
So it makes sense within that context. But yeah, we'll have to talk more in regards with that with too, because we got a lot to cover there too.
Oh
So
boy. Yep.
anyways, but yeah, that's all I got on my end. To ladies and gentlemen of YouTube, thank you very much for listening in on this.
And we'll see you next time. That's all, folks.